Resident Evil 7 is a game with a long development history, with so much content that was cut from the game and exciting concepts that never made it to the final product. I currently own a book called the Resident Evil 7 Document File. This book includes the entire development history of Resident Evil 7, including all of the cut content. Some of this content can only be found in this book, so this video may have some surprises in it. Shout out to a Resident Evil content creator known as Evil Blitz for inspiring me to make this video. Now, let's all dive into the cut content of Resident Evil 7. The main hall of the Baker house was originally going to look very different, with the grandfather clock being in the center, a doorway in the background, and even two sets of stairs that lead to the second floor. The developer comment says this: early concept art of the entrance hall, a draftly entranceway. Light illuminates it from the outside, giving off a slightly different impression of the Baker residence. The twin staircases, along with the decorative clock, indicate a wealthy lifestyle. I am very happy with the current Baker house that we got in the final game, but if you ask me, this design is really cool. You may find it surprising that many enemies were cut from the game. Here, we can see a very different variant of the Baker family, including new members we've never seen before. We can see eerie twins, an inhuman creature, and even a hunting dog. The dog was going to be a stalker enemy that snitches you out. He would bark, then soon after, Jack Baker would come along to welcome you to the family. Not only was the Baker family going to look very different, but Capcom even had plans to add more members to the family. Resident Evil 7 was set to have a female variant of the molded. I tried to do all of my research to find exactly why they cut this from the game, but I simply couldn't find anything. But it is cool to see that there was different variants of the mold, and honestly, it would have been cool to see some of these variants. And am I the only one, or does this female molded kind of look like Alexia Ashford? Now, this is one of my favorite pieces of cut content, but Marguerite looked very different from the final product. And even though I'm very happy with how she turned out, I gotta be honest, I am a big fan of this design right here. So in the final game, we see Marguerite, and once you have that mini fight with her, the next time you see her, she's like a giant spider. Originally, Capcom had plans to actually show her turning into that spider, and her spider form was going to look very different. I mean, you can see she was literally going to be a spider. If I were to guess why they cut this out, it's probably because people have phobias of spiders, and apparently Resident Evil 7 was too scary for a lot of people, so I feel like this would have made it worse. Now, in this design right here, this is closer to what she looked like in the final game. But something about this image is haunting to me. She looks creepier, she looks more eerie. Maybe it's the design of her face, and I feel like this would have worked better in the game. Let me know what you guys think. Okay, so this one is very interesting to me as well. It seems as though Resident Evil 7 was set to feature regular zombies. Capcom introduced photogrammetry to their team, which basically meant that they could capture real object models and transfer them into the game. This is why the RE engine is so successful and partly why it's so efficient. They made various models of zombies to experiment with this feature, and considering the fact that the molded originally looked more human, it makes me think that Resident Evil 7 was set to feature regular zombies as well. It doesn't make sense why they would go all out and make these zombie models just to test out the RE engine. It makes me think that they had plans to introduce zombies to the final game. Alright, so this right here is less of a piece of cut content and it's more of a design change. But Jack Baker originally had a slightly different design. If we look at this design right here, this is pretty much what he looked like in the final game. It's not exact because it's a concept, but it's pretty much what they wanted to go for. But the major difference is here we can see his face is very different from the final game. Here we can see that he actually has a beard, indicating that his design was meant to look closer to his human look. The exterior of the shipwreck at the end of Resident Evil 7 was supposed to look very different. In my opinion, it looks much better in this concept art right here. Locations in Resident Evil games are always getting changed, but this one interests me the most. It feels like development was slightly rushed towards the third act of Resident Evil 7, since the ship is considered the weakest part of the game by many people, including myself. The first and the second act are amazing, and I feel like it kind of falls off in the third act. Still, this original design looks very interesting. The ship was also going to have more rooms where we can see the soldiers who were killed during the attack. And even though most of the soldiers ended up turning into molded, I think it's interesting to see the actual soldiers be killed during this attack. And I wish we got to see more of it in the final game. One of my favorite pieces of cut content is the one that features Evelyn inside of her testing room. You know, where all of the scientists experimented with her. While this wasn't present in the final game, it's interesting to see that Capcom had plans to show us what happened to Evelyn before she arrived on the ship, and then at the Baker residence. In the Daughters DLC, we got a little bit of a prequel of Resident Evil 7, but I really wish we got more lore surrounding the fact on how Evelyn was actually created. I think this really would have helped with the lore aspect of Resident Evil 7. Alright, before I move on to some of my favorite cut content from Resident Evil 7, I first want to show you guys the real Baker house that was used to model the one in the game. The subheading here reads this: the coverage team visited the state of Louisiana in the American South, facing the Gulf of Mexico. They went to various places that could be used as reference for the game, such as local residences, plantation houses, and greenhouses. To learn more about the area's distinctive culture, they also headed to voodoo-related shops, abandoned hospitals, and barns. One thing I love about Capcom is I love how much research they do for their games. And I thought the Baker house was modeled from scratch. I had no idea that there was a house simply based off of the one in the game. So if you ask me, hats off to Capcom. They did a great job. Resident Evil 7's development team included storyboards that featured some minor and major changes to the story. For example, Mia would get stabbed in a different area rather than her neck. There were scenes where we could see a human body turn into a molded creature. Jack Baker had scenes where he would harm himself while Ethan watches from a distance, and even going as far to show Marguerite having a creepy entrance in her spider-like form. It seems like Ethan is trying to cross a bridge and she climbs up on top of the bridge in a very creepy way. Imagine walking a long dark bridge and all of a sudden you see a long giant spider arm just crawl up. Ooh, I don't even want to think about that. The Baker house was originally going to have a giant room underneath the house where a giant animal-like creature rests. This was going to be a giant pit where the Bakers would feed this particular creature. I would assume they would feed it human bodies, but unfortunately, we never got to see what this creature would have looked like. But this concept alone sounds scary, and I really wish something like this was in the final game. Just imagine roaming the Baker house and hearing this giant creature underneath you. It would have made the game a little bit more mysterious, and it would have brought out our curiosity just a little bit. But I seriously would have loved to see what this creature would have looked like. And that was the cut content of Resident Evil 7. Let me know your favorite piece of cut content down below. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.